There's something that most wilderness survival instructors or bushcraft teachers don't know about real wilderness or real backcountry survival. And that is, most of what they're teaching is absolute nonsense. In this video, I'm going to talk about the subject of actual emergency survival in the backcountry from a search and rescue volunteer's perspective. So, to understand my perspective on this subject, I have been involved with search and rescue, both professionally and as a volunteer, for close to 30 years, off and on. There have been spans of times in there where I wasn't involved with search and rescue, and then there was. I've been on my current team for 2 years, coming up on 2 years. Um, and that is a volunteer team in Wyoming, which will remain nameless because the views I'm expressing in this video are not the official views of my search and rescue team, and I don't even want to get into that whole rigmarole. So, in 2025, our team did 25 missions. This year, we've already done one, and it's, the middle of January. And 2024, the team did 48 missions. So pretty active. Anywhere from 2 to 4 a month is pretty normal. And, there'll be times where we don't do any for a month or two, and then we're just getting hammered back to back to back to back. So what I want to talk about in this video is what I have observed in the context of people getting caught in emergencies in the backcountry. Because it really is a matter of, if you're going to the woods with a whole pack of gear, you're not generally in a survival situation unless an emergency occurs. And what this perspective allows for is, you can look at what actually happens that causes people to need to get rescued, and then base your actual survival training, not your backpacking or your camping or anything like that, but your actual survival training on real world scenarios that actually occur. So there's a number of things that we see, and the first and most common are medical issues. Those may be medical emergencies, like somebody having a diabetic attack and they're out of medicine or their medicine's not working. It may be somebody with a heart condition having issues. Somebody breaks a leg. The vast majority of rescues that I've been involved with on my current team have involved musculoskeletal injuries to the lower extremities. Somebody rolls an ankle and they don't feel like they can walk out. Somebody breaks a leg and they don't feel like they can walk out. Things along those lines. Okay, there have been some diabetic issues. There have been some heart condition issues. But the vast majority of the rescues that I've been involved in have been musculoskeletal injuries, which tells us that the first thing you need to know how to do is deal with medical issues, whether that's splinting a sprained ankle so that somebody can, be somewhat ambulatory, or it is dealing with diabetic attacks or, heart conditions or psychiatric issues that, maybe you didn't know about before you left. And that's really pretty easy to deal with. If you go take even ideally at least a wilderness first responder course, but even if all you do is take a basic first aid CPR class, you're going to have a leg up on most people in the backcountry, okay? That should be your number one priority from a training perspective. Not how to start a fire, not how to build a shelter with nothing but a pocket knife, none of that. Your first priority should be medical. How do I deal with the medical issues that I'm likely to see in my environment? Now, here in Wyoming, this time of year, hypothermia and frostbite and cold weather injuries are a major issue. Okay? And in a lot of cases, building a fire is going to be the easiest remedy for that. But, we're still going to have musculoskeletal issues. We're going to have avalanches. There was a fatality a couple weeks ago. Guy got caught, snowmobiler got caught in an avalanche. There's one in Idaho a couple weeks ago. Guy got caught in an avalanche and killed. And so for us, avalanche awareness and avalanche knowledge is kind of ancillary to the medical issues, because in the wintertime that can cause some serious medical issues, obviously. Whether you get crushed or whether you manage to swim out of it, you're going to be wet and cold and miserable real quick, and you need to know how to deal with that. But medical is going to be your primary one. The second most common rescue that we do is people who have mechanical failures in the backcountry. That can be a side-by-side or a snow machine breaking down. They can get, stuck and they can't retrieve the vehicle. Things like that. Okay, the most recent one we had that was a mechanical issue, they just got in a pretty sketchy spot and got pretty nervous that they were going to slide off the mountain, so they called for help. And I wasn't on that. I was actually on my way to town for the mission when I got turned around because we had enough people. But that one, apparently they got there and one of the local guys jumped in the truck and got it out of the sketchy spot, and the people were able to go back. But that was really eye-opening for some of the guys on the team that were newer, that hadn't been on many rescues, because these folks were from out of state. And when they got there, the man was wearing, cowboy boots and jeans and a light jacket, and his wife had on, I think they're called Uggs. Those little faux fur boots that women like, they're all fashionable and stuff. And jeans and a light jacket. They didn't have any survival gear in the vehicle. They obviously didn't really know how to drive in snow, because our guys said it was like, this was not a big deal. Nobody local would have gotten stuck, let alone called for help. And that's not gatekeeping for out-of-towners or out-of-staters. That's not picking on them for being out-of-state. They just didn't have the knowledge base or the experience to know what they were doing. Okay? And that's the point, is if you're going to use mechanical transportation in the backcountry, there's a couple basic skill sets you should have. Number one, you should know how to operate that machinery in arduous terrain. Okay. Running sleds on groomed trails is not the same thing as running a sled in deep powder in the backcountry. All right. We do a lot of rescues where guys end up in a tree well, the empty space underneath a spruce or a pine tree where the snow doesn't get, and they just, they're going too fast and they can't stop, or they don't see it because the snow is so deep that, the top of the tree is covered in snow, but as soon as you hit that, where all that snow underneath is not there, they just, boom, and they're sunk. And that can result in musculoskeletal injuries, but the bigger issue is just a matter of knowing how to read terrain if you're going to be doing that, and knowing how to recover your vehicle. If you're going to take a side-by-side or a four-wheeler or a Jeep or a overland rig or something like that, you need to know basic vehicle recovery. And that is going to keep you, knowing how to get your vehicle unstuck after you screw up and get it stuck is going to keep you from having to call search and rescue. All right. The reality is, and I'm going to come back to this, but the reality is, in the modern world, you're not going to be stuck out there very long. All right, unless you just seriously screw up. But I'll come back to that in a little bit. So medical, mechanical, avalanches and ancillary if you're in snow country in the mountains, and those are really the big ones. We've had in the summertime, we'll have water rescues and stuff, but that's kind of related to mechanical issues and just knowing how to do what you're trying to do. If you're gonna canoe the Green River, okay, the Sietskedy, the Spanish River, whatever you want to call it, it's called the Green nowadays. There's a lot of places on that river that are pretty intense rapids. If you don't have any experience with that, or you have experience with that, but you're not a strong swimmer, you probably ought to go do some training before you decide, oh, hey, I'm going to go, canoe this river. I'm going to go kayak this river. If you're on the Snake River, especially going through the Snake River Canyon between Alpine Junction, Wyoming, and Hoback Junction, Wyoming, you really need to know what you're doing before you do it, unless you're going on like a guided raft ride or something, and then you've got guides that are dealing with that. But it's really, there's this trend in modern America, and I blame YouTube, although it's not really YouTube, that people watch some videos of something and think, oh, that looks cool, I want to go do that. Well, I can do that, and you can if you learn how to do it properly first. But if you just go out and drop a bunch of money on a new kayak or canoe and a PFD, personal flotation device, and then you go try to do something, you're not going to have a positive outcome because you just don't know what you don't know. And so that's an issue. But those are the big ones. It's just know your medical, know your avalanche awareness if you're in the mountains, and know how to execute the skills you need to execute. Nobody from Ohio, is going to come to Wyoming and be like, oh, hey, I'm going to go climb the Grand Teton. Have you ever climbed before? Nope. Walked up a flight of stairs once. You're just not going to do it. If you do, you're an idiot. You're going to start with some bouldering in Ohio and maybe some bluff climbing and stuff. And then you're probably going to do some easier expeditions, and some backcountry expeditions. I mean, the Grand Teton's not a big, I should say Gannett, where it's like an all-day hike just to get to start climbing. And it's all in wilderness. So that becomes an issue. And those are the big ones. And fortunately, those are all pretty easy to remedy so that your survival training doesn't require you to know how to trap, birds with the Ojibwe bird snare so that you can eat, or, you're not going to have to clunk a porcupine over the head with a stick to eat. You don't necessarily have to build, a lean-to out of brush to stay alive. You can do all those things, but now you're doing them for entertainment or for living, for life, not because if I don't do this, I'm going to die. All right, hopefully that makes sense. So it's important to understand that if you are in the lower 48 And really, even if you're in most of Alaska, you know, you can be in the Brooks Range, or you can be in the Wrangells, or you can be in the just somewhere along the Cusco Swim. I never pronounced it. Cusco Swim. I never pronounced it. Even when I was there, I couldn't pronounce it right. Anyway, you know, the Yukon, wherever. Um, you've got to screw up pretty bad to find yourself out for longer than about 72 hours without somebody coming to get you. All right, so there are two ways to deal with an emergency, to communicate with the outside world in the event of emergency in the backcountry. The first and most prevalent today is going to be a satellite communicator, like a Spot device or a Garmin or something along those lines. All right. They're relatively inexpensive. You know, even if you have to have a subscription to keep it going, it's usually pretty cheap, and you can turn it off and turn it on as you need it. Another alternative, if you have an Apple phone, I don't, I have an Android, is they have the ability to satellite communicate now. So if you're out of service, you can actually switch to texting through the satellite system, and so you've got the same level of communication, maybe even a little bit better than with your GPS or stuff. We had one mission last year where the people had a text-capable communicator, but they'd never used it, and so they were really having trouble with it and leaving a lot of messages hanging. So we were getting really poor communication from them. But we knew exactly where they were, and we were able to get there and get them out pretty reasonably quick. I'll come back to that one. If you have got satellite communication with the outside world, you're not going to be out there more than 24 hours. You're probably not going to be out there more than 12 hours, but you're damn sure not going to be out there more than 24 hours. Somebody's coming to get you. All right. It may stretch out a little bit because of hours of darkness. It may stretch out because, like we have a helicopter for our team, at least in the summer months. So if we get it before, long enough before dark, we can usually grab somebody. And even if it's, 2 hours before dark, we can usually fly in, grab somebody, pluck them out, and be back before dark. But not all teams have that. Most teams in Wyoming don't have helicopters. There's only a couple that do. And so it might stretch out to 24 hours because a horse team's got to come in and get you, or a backpack team's got to come in and get you. But you're not, something's got to have gone pretty bad if it's going to take longer than 24 hours for somebody to get to you. All right. Which tells us you're not going to die of dehydration, despite the fear mongering. You're not going to die of hunger. Okay. You're probably not going to die of exposure, even in a fucking thunderstorm or a snowstorm. There's a caveat to that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you're really, if you've got a satellite community, you're not going to die unless you've suffered a catastrophic medical injury, which goes back to what we talked about earlier. The first thing you need to be worried about with survival training is medical training. Know how to deal with that. Make sure the people you're with know how to deal with that. If you're solo and you fall off a fucking cliff, sucks to be you, you're dead. That's something that is a risk factor I have dealt with my entire adult life. It's not what I'm particularly worried about, which I'll come back to in just a minute, even before we come back to the cold weather issue. But if you've got the medical thing down, nobody's going to die in 24 hours. It's just not going to fucking happen. All right? The older alternative to satellite communications, which is what I started with because I'm old and we didn't have satellite communicators when I started spending time in the backcountry, either as a kid or as an adult. And I should caveat this by saying, to this day, I don't carry a satellite communicator, unless I'm on a search and rescue mission. Then I don't have a choice. But for my personal trips in the backcountry, I don't carry that shit. I'm not worried about it. I don't need it. My wife and I have had conversations about it because, I spend a lot of time in the backcountry with the kids now. And so that may change. It probably won't, but in case she watches this, it might change. But the old method was to leave an itinerary. I am going to depart from this trailhead. I'm going to return to this or this trailhead. I'm going to be gone X number of days. Okay. That way, if you weren't back by, day X, your trusted reporting party knew, hey, something happened. I need to spool up search and rescue to go find them. And we still do missions where that's the case. Somebody's overdue and they're not carrying a satellite communicator. So we're like, okay, where were they going in? Where were they coming out? What was their planned route? And so let's say, and this kind of extends that survival window from 24 hours out to a little bit longer. So let's say, for the sake of argument, and I'm using this because this particular trip happened even though they had a satellite. Let's say you were doing a planned 8-day traverse of the Wind River Mountains in Wyoming. Okay? And day 6, you get hurt. You twist an ankle, you break a leg, something like that. You slip into some deadfall and get pinned and you can't get out. There was a case a number of years ago where that happened with a guy, and he actually got wedged in with a rock, between two rocks in a boulder field, and couldn't get out, and he died. As I recall, he had also kind of wandered off his planned itinerary trip, but if you get hurt and you have medical background, you're probably not going to die from it, unless it's a catastrophic injury that even search and rescue is not going to be able to save you for. Again, you fall off a cliff for 100 feet, nobody's saving you. It doesn't matter how good where you're at. I mean, you could be in town and have that happen. You're probably not going to get saved. If you fall in the river and drown, we're not going to be able to save you. It is what it is. That is a risk that we face when we spend time in the backcountry. It's one that we accept, that we spend time in the backcountry. And that risk, in my mind, that risk is part of the attraction. It's like, okay, I'm testing myself. I'm not fighting nature, but I'm testing myself to see if I've still got that basic human skill of staying alive on my own or with a small group. So you're on day 6 of an 8-day planned trip, and nobody's going to start looking for you till day 8, right? Okay. Well, even if we have to walk in to look for you, it's not going to take more than 72 hours for us to find you, assuming you're alive and where you said you were going to be. It's not going to take more than 72 hours for us to find you, even though we're not starting till day 8. So it might be day 9, 11 before we find you. But again, you're not going to starve to death. You're not going to die of dehydration. You might be uncomfortable. You might be really uncomfortable, but you're not going to die. All right. And as soon as we get there, we're going to start force hydrating you. We're going to make sure you're getting water. We're going to make sure you've got food. We're going to deal with any medical issues. We're going to make sure your body temperature is stabilized. So again, it rolls back to 24 to 72 hours is emergency survival. Anything past that, and here's the thing about that planned 8-day trip going over. You might have only brought food for 8 days, but that means you're going to eat right up till day 8. You might be staying out 3 extra days, but you've got shelter because you've been out for 6 days already. Did you just like walk into the woods for 6 days with nothing on you? If you're a bushcrafter, maybe, because that's what you're trying to do. But if you made it to day 6, you've got some kind of shelter. You've made some kind of shelter. You've got a plan for shelter. You've got a plan for fire. So you're not going to die because you don't know how to run a trap line. You're not going to die unless that's your thing. You're not going to die because you don't know how to build shelter. You're not going to die because, because you're lost. Most of the things that survival instructors teach really have no bearing on actual backcountry survival in the civilian world, at least, in America today. Or even in Canada, most of Canada. I mean, presumably, if your plane goes down in like Nunavut or the Northwest Territories, you're going to have some freaking issues. But even then, I mean, it's not 1923 or 1950. There's so much satellite tracking of aircraft and stuff. You're probably not going to be out there very long. I don't go to Alaska anymore. And I never had a plane crash when I was in Alaska. So, and the only times I've gone into the bush in Canada, I was, walking off the road into the bush. So, if you have a way, if you have satellite communication or you leave a plant, your emergency survival in the backcountry really needs to focus on 3 things. 2 of them we already talked about. Medical, with the ancillary of avalanche awareness if you're in avalanche country, and mechanical, making sure your machinery can get you out. Beyond that, the only really big concern that you really need to have is maintaining your core body temperature so that you don't die of exposure. If you are out, like it's, in the upper 20s, mid 20s right now, so it's not terribly cold, but it's going to get down below 0 tonight. It was like 8 below when I got up this morning. So if you're not dressed for the conditions, like you're driving on a snow-covered road and you're wearing jeans and cowboy boots or jeans and Uggs and a light jacket, and you get in a pickle where you can't keep your truck running to keep you warm, or you're worried about it running out of gas, and you don't have camp gear with you, there's a really, really simple solution for that. Okay? Nobody has ever died of hypothermia or exposure sitting next to a fire. Full stop. Okay? Now, I know there are instructors out there that will tell you, oh, you can't always guarantee that you're going to be able to get a fire going. You could be in a blizzard. You could be in a rainstorm. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, I've started fires with flint and steel in a fucking torrential downpour and in a roaring blizzard where visibility was like 10 feet because we had 60-mile-an-hour winds. Flint and steel fires actually start easier in the wind than in still air because that oxygen is getting to it even if you're not blowing on it. One of the things that I see, and this always flabbergasts me about the bushcraft instructors, and it's the way that I always know that they're like, 100 feet off the fucking trailhead. And that is this idea that finding fuel wood in the backcountry is difficult. Okay, so I live on the edge of one of the largest contiguous wilderness areas in the lower 48. Okay, we have the Gros Ventre, the Shoshone, the Bridger Teton, and I think the Fitzpatrick actually touches too. All those wilderness areas are separately administrated, but they all touch. They all border each other. So you can, like, millions of acres of wilderness, like no mechanized vehicle, no wheeled vehicles, etc. And that's not counting the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management land that surrounds the wilderness areas. And one thing that you will find if you actually travel in real forest, and I found this here, I've seen it in Montana and Alaska, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, even Tennessee and Kentucky and, Missouri and Arkansas. If you actually get into the forest, not somebody's woodlot, not somebody's backyard, but if you actually get into the forest, you are never going to lack for firewood. There is going to be so much dead standing and dead fallen wood, or even just willow thickets, where there's all kinds of firewood. There's like I was talking to a neighbor the other day, and he had talked to the local Forest Service office, and I said, oh yeah, in your area up there, we have a 0% position on fire. If we even see smoke, we have to put it out immediately. And we were both like, why? That country needs to burn so damn bad. There is so much fuel built up. I have never been in the backcountry and not been able to find firewood. Now, if you don't know how to process firewood to get a fire going, if you don't know how to process it for matches, or you don't know how to process it for a lighter, or you don't know how to use a ferro rod, or you don't know how to use flint and steel, that can be an issue. But there's a really, really simple search and rescue trick that I learned from one of my mentors about 30 years ago for actual emergency survival. You can go to Walmart or Napa or AutoZone or O'Reilly's or whatever your local auto parts store is, and go to the automotive section and buy a little bitty 3-pack. They'll be about this long, about this wide, and about this thick. And it will be a 3-pack of highway safety flares. Okay? They're like magnesium inside, so they'll burn at like 5,800 degrees. They ignite with like a pull starter. They'll burn even when even in the rain. You can light one and throw it in the water and it'll fucking burn. And so even if you don't know how to do a flint and steel fire, or you don't know how to use a ferro rod, or you can't get your Bic lighter to light because you've got 30-mile-an-hour winds, or you can't get your matches to go because you got 30-mile-an-hour winds and it's raining, you pile up a bunch of brush and you pop that highway flare into the middle of that, I guarantee you, no matter what the weather conditions are, you're going to have a fire. And pretty fucking quick. All right. I have piled up, a 4-foot round by like 4-foot pile of brush and logs and deadfall. A lot of it soaking fucking wet, laying on the ground. Popped the highway flare through in the middle of it. In 2 minutes, I had to back up because it was burning so hot already. 5,800 degrees is going to ignite wet wood. It is going to dry the moisture out so fast, push the moisture out, and then ignite the wood, and then the fire itself is going to push the rest of the moisture out. It is a foolproof method. Okay? If you're going to be recreating the backcountry in a vehicle, a motorized conveyance, throw a pack of highway flares in there. You don't even have to carry anything else. Okay? You don't have to carry anything else. Throw a pack of highway flares in there. And you're going to stay alive till somebody comes to get you. Okay? And again, nobody has ever died of exposure sitting next to a roaring fire. Now, we had a mission, I think it was last year, it might have been the year before. And there was a fella backpacking on the Continental Divide Trail. And he got caught in the rain and got wet and wasn't doing very well. And so he called for rescue. He's like, I can't. Okay, that like stereotypical soccer mom thing. I just can't. And so the team drove side by sides up and got close, and then they hiked into up to the boundary, and then they hiked in to get him. And when they got there, he was sitting under a tree on his pack, wrapped up in a poncho or in his tarp or whatever, and like borderline hypothermic. And, one of the older guys on the team, really good friend of mine, love him to death, was like, dude, why didn't you start a fire? There's firewood everywhere. Why didn't you start a fire? He's like, well, I didn't really think that was, in the spirit of the wilderness. And my buddy's name is also John. Looked at him, he's like, and dying is? All right. I mean, everybody's got their moral code, and everybody should live their life according to their morals. But so the search and the rescue guy's like, well, we can't walk him out right now. It's too dark. This guy's too far gone. He's borderline hypothermic. He's not going to make it out because it was, 5 or 6, 7 miles to the vehicles. And they're like, we're going to get a fire going to warm this guy up and get some hot drinks and hot food into him. So they built a roaring big fire with a highway flare, and got the guy warmed up, and they brewed some coffee and some tea and hot cocoa and got him drinking all that, and to start heating up his core, and they got some hot food into him, and in the morning they all, they packed him up and walked out, and the guy was fine. Nobody built a shelter. Like, they literally just built a big honking fucking fire and put the guy in his sleeping bag next to it. It's like, here, sit here where you're getting warm, drink these warm fluids, you're going to be fine. Now, does this mean that you should not carry basic survival gear? And by survival gear in this context, I mean camp gear with you in the backcountry? No, obviously not. that would be fucking stupid. Okay? You don't need a lot. Okay? The 10 essentials from the Mountaineers, Seattle Mountaineers, the 10 essentials, everybody involved in the outdoors is familiar with them. Those are not survival gear. Those are the basic gear you should carry so you're never in a survival situation. That is the point of the 10 essentials. The point of the 10 essentials is, oh, this is in case I'm in an emergency. And this is just for no, those are what you carry anytime you go in the outdoors so that you're never in a survival situation. Okay? So, guys, this has been kind of a long video, but it's something that just torques me to no end. And the other night I was sewing a shirt, actually the shirt I have on under my sweater. Oh, where'd it go? Where did it go? There it is. Nice linen, gingham print. So I was sewing that, and I was listening to YouTube videos as I was sewing, and I was listening to one I don't know who it was, one of the bushcraft survival gurus, and one of the videos that I listened to, the guy said that comment about, oh, well, you can't always get a fire going. Fool, I don't know how poorly trained you are, but I can get a fire going in blizzards, right? Because I'm from Wyoming, and unless you're going to stay indoors 8 or 9 months out of the year, you better know how to get a fire going in a snowstorm. And it just irked me because the reality is you can absolutely get a fire going in actual backcountry terrain anywhere in this country really quick and really easily. Okay, so medical. Know how to take care of medical emergencies. That will alleviate probably 99% of the emergency situations that you're going to deal with in the backcountry to keep you stable until search and rescue gets to you. So you're no longer in a survival situation. You're on a camping trip with a medical issue. Number 2, if you're going to be using vehicles, whether they're motorized or boats or canoes, whatever, know how to operate them and have the actual skill set to use them efficiently and effectively in where you're going to be. Okay? My kids and I canoe on some of the backcountry lakes. There's one lake here locally where we can drive right to the lake, but the far shore is in the wilderness area. So we'll canoe into there and then hike in from there. And it's a big lake, and it's got a lot of wind. So we spend a little bit of time every spring practicing canoeing in rough water. Know what you're doing. If you're going to be on horses, know how to deal with your horses. Know how to ride a little bit of a bucking horse ride if you have to, so you don't get bucked off and break your back. Know how to fall so when you do get bucked off, you don't break yourself so badly. And I mean, honestly, at that point, there's a little bit of just be tough. But so know those basic things and have a plan to be able to get a fire going no matter what. Okay? After that, whatever camp gear you want to carry, the 10 essentials, a full mountaineering pack full of gear, that stuff's just extra. That's just comfort items at that point. All right? So, guys, I'm going to go finish checking my trap line. And then I haven't caught anything yet today, but we'll see. And we'll see you next time.